11 days after I secretly changed the shampoo in my bathroom, one of the most famous women in America appeared on television with a completely shaved head. I nearly dropped my coffee. The actress, Vivian Marsh, stood on a Los Angeles red carpet beneath hundreds of camera flashes. A silk scarf covered part of her head, but there was no hiding what had happened. Reporters shouted, "Vivian, what happened to your hair? Was it an accident? Are you sick?" She smiled tightly and walked past them. Nobody knew the truth. I did, my husband did, and Vivian did. Because 11 days earlier, she had stood inside my shower and used my shampoo. My name is Thea Bellamy, and for 16 years, I believed I knew my husband. His name was Julian. We had built what looked like a perfect marriage, a comfortable home in Austin, quiet dinners, weekend walks, and enough memories to convince me that nothing could destroy us. Then I found a single blonde hair in our shower. I stood there staring at it. My hair was dark brown. Julian's was dark too. We lived alone. I picked up the hair and felt something inside me collapse. I threw it away and told myself it meant nothing. That was the first lie I told myself. At breakfast, I casually asked Julian if anyone had visited the house. "No," he said. "Are you sure?" He looked at me strangely. "Why wouldn't I be?" I smiled. "Just asking." But from that morning on, I started noticing things I'd ignored for months. His phone was suddenly always face down. He took it into rooms he'd never taken it before. He showered immediately after coming home. He started caring more about his clothes. And whenever I asked simple questions, he turned them back on me. "Are you okay? You seem stressed. Maybe you need a vacation." My best friend Colette didn't think I needed a vacation. When I told her about the hair, she became serious. "Thea, don't confront him yet." "Why?" "Because if he's lying, he'll only get better at it." She paused. "Watch him." So I did. Then I noticed something else. My shampoo. I'd used the same brand for years. Julian hated the smell and had his own products. One evening, I picked up my bottle. It felt lighter. I knew exactly how much should have been inside. I marked the level with my fingernail. Then I put it back. 3 days later, the level had dropped. Someone was using it. Someone other than me. I felt sick. The blonde hair hadn't been a coincidence. Someone had been in my bathroom. Someone had stood beneath my shower. Someone had touched my things. And Julian had cleaned everything up perfectly. He thought I wouldn't notice. He forgot something. I measure things. I'm a designer. Measurements are part of my life. I notice when something moves half an inch. So I decided to measure my husband's honesty. I went to a pharmacy and bought hair removal cream. I knew what I was doing was reckless. I also knew I needed the truth. When Julian was working in his office, I went into the bathroom and carefully mixed some into my shampoo. Then I returned the bottle to exactly the same position. I wiped the counter, washed my hands, and stared at myself in the mirror. "What have you done?" I didn't know whether I was protecting myself or becoming someone I wouldn't recognize. For 3 days, nothing happened. Then, on the 4th day, Julian told me he had a long meeting. After he left, I checked the bottle. My heart stopped. The level had dropped. Someone had used it. That night, I barely slept. Then the next evening, Vivian Marsh appeared on television. Her hair was gone, completely gone. I stared at her face, the blonde hair, the shampoo, Julian's secret meetings. Everything suddenly made sense. Vivian was the woman who had been in my house, the woman who had used my shower, the woman who had used my shampoo. And now she was trying to explain away her sudden hair loss without exposing herself. For weeks, the media speculated. Illness, a movie role, a chemical accident, a publicity stunt. Nobody knew, except 3 people. And Julian became increasingly nervous. Every time Vivian appeared on television, he changed the channel. One Sunday morning, I left a newspaper open on the kitchen table. Vivian's photograph was on the front page. Julian walked in. He saw it. His face changed. "Do you know her?" I asked. "From work." "That's all?" He picked up his coffee. "She's complicated." Then he disappeared into his office. That was when I knew I couldn't wait anymore. That Tuesday night, I stood in the living room. "We need to talk." Julian sighed. "Thea, I'm tired." "No." He looked at me. "I found a blonde hair in our shower. He froze. Then came the excuses. It could have come from anywhere. No. I shook my head. It couldn't. I told him about the shampoo. His face became pale. How long? I asked. Silence. How long, Julian? A few months. I laughed bitterly. A few months? He looked down. It was a mistake. You brought her into our home. I never meant for it to happen. You let her use my shower. Thea, my shampoo. He stopped. Then his eyes met mine. What did you put in it? The room became completely silent. I didn't answer. He already knew. You knew, he whispered. I knew someone was using it. He covered his face. I watched the man I had loved for 16 years fall apart in front of me. But something inside me had already gone quiet. You didn't just cheat, I said. You brought another woman into the one place I believed was ours. He cried. He apologized. He said he still loved me. But love without trust was just another word. The next morning, I hired a lawyer. A few weeks later, a journalist named Elliot contacted me. He didn't want gossip. He wanted my story. So I told him. I told him about the hair, the shampoo, the lies, the fear. The moment I realized my husband had been living another life. I left one thing out. The hair removal cream. That secret belonged to me. The article came out on a Monday. By breakfast, thousands of people had read my story. Some called me cruel. Others called me brave. I stopped reading the comments because I finally understood something. I wasn't trying to destroy Vivian. I wasn't even trying to punish Julian anymore. I was trying to find myself. The divorce was finalized months later. 16 years of marriage ended with a signature. I cried that day. But it wasn't the kind of crying that begs someone to stay. It was the kind that lets someone go. Julian eventually disappeared from my life. Vivian disappeared from the spotlight for a while. And me? I started living again. I walked through Austin without checking my phone. I drank coffee without wondering where my husband was. I slept peacefully. I stopped measuring shampoo. I stopped counting hours. I stopped searching for evidence. One evening, I stood on my balcony watching the sunset. The sky was pink and gold. I thought about that tiny blonde hair. Something so small had changed my entire life. Then I smiled, because Julian had cleaned up after her perfectly. He had put everything back exactly where it belonged. The towels, the bottles, the shower, our marriage. He thought if everything looked normal, I wouldn't notice. But he forgot that I measure things. And sometimes, the smallest change is enough to reveal the biggest lie. I had spent 16 years measuring everything around me. That year, I finally learned to measure something more important. How much of myself I was willing to lose for someone who had already lost me? The answer was simple, not another day.